Oh, they said a
Looks like it is 4 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get this special meeting started of the Salina Heritage Commission. Today is Tuesday, December 13th.
The fact that the agenda says Wednesday.
Right.
We had a lot of meetings to keep track of,
Okay,
so
well,
we'll get that corrected.
thank you. Can we get a call to order then? And Chair, requesting that staff confirm the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been properly provided.
I can confirm that the packet was posted and the required notice of the meeting was provided.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
See if we have Commissioner Baffa, Commissioner Gilmore,
Present.
Commissioner Ivy,
Here.
Commissioner Mike Sell,
Here.
Commissioner Martin,
Here.
Commissioner Seibel,
Here.
Chair Gillum.
Here.
So we are only missing Commissioner Baffa and student member Stephanie Silverman, but we have a quorum to conduct today's business, and we've met our required notice, and so we can move ahead with the consideration of the minutes.
Okay, we have item 2.1, the approval of the minutes from the October 12, 2002 special meeting. I'll give everyone just a few minutes to review those and ask any questions.
Primary focus of that meeting was looking at a nomination for the Pioneer Hall at Kansas Wesleyan.
Any questions for that, for the meeting notes? Nope. Is there a motion to approve those?
I'll move to approve minutes as posted.
Do we have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the meeting minutes from October 12th. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. We will move on to new business then, and I would like to make a note that I will be representing my client for both items 3.1 and 3.2, so I will step down at this time so that I can present those items.
So the first item under public hearings today that we provided notice of for today's meeting is a certificate of appropriateness application. It was filed by Ms. Gillum, JGR Architects, and that is done on behalf of the Overland Property Group, which is the overall owner of the H.D. Lee complex of buildings. And this request deals with what is commonly referred to as Building 2. So in 2018, this body and the Downtown Design Review Board reviewed plans for Phase 1, Building 1, which is the building closest to Elm. This is the building across the courtyard from Building 1, and the request here is for a certificate of appropriateness to allow exterior modifications to be made to the Lee Hardware building, and also a request for demolition of a non-historic two-story addition to the rear of the Lee Hardware building. So Dustin is showing you on the screen where Building 2 is, which has the white roof, and then tucked into an alcove right here is a two-story addition that you have some photos of in your packet. So the two things that we're looking at this afternoon is, one, do the exterior modifications proposed for Building 2 alter or remove any character defining features of that building? And then the second aspect is whether the addition can be approved, allowing that removal without doing any damage to the historic integrity of the remaining buildings. And so we've provided in our report the background. There was construction on this corner beforehand and actually used by Mr. Lee, but there was a fairly significant fire in 1903 which destroyed the buildings on this site, and Mr. Lee constructed the 2 new 5-story fireproof structures on the site of the originals in 1905. We do have some photos in your packet that actually depict what it looked like shortly thereafter at the turn of the century. And so the last use of this building was in 2005, and it's been vacant and unused since that time. The previous owners submitted a nomination form to nominate these buildings to the National Register of Historic Places. That was endorsed by this commission in January of 2008 and by the City Commission, and these buildings were placed on the National Register in 2008. And one of the benefits of being on the National Register is that it makes the projects potentially eligible for state and federal historic tax credits. So if you'll recall, in August of 2022, the city renewed its certificate or certified local government agreement with the state, which means that this body does the reviews of National Register properties instead of the State Historic Preservation Office. So you are conducting that review locally on behalf of the State Historic Preservation Office. And the plan is to take this 5-story building and convert it into loft apartments. And so there'll be 50 units in Building 2, and they will be comprised of primarily 1-bedroom units, but also a few 2- and 3-bedroom units. And so there's 2 elements that we're looking at today. One deals with exterior modifications, which would include tuck pointing, brick and mortar repair and replacement, removal of fire escapes, and then removing the existing glass block on the first floor facade of the west-facing building. So this area right here that has glass block and is not very open or inviting, the plan is to remove that and replace it with a new storefront consisting of aluminum windows. And then the other aspect is removal of the non-historic addition and conversion of that to a new courtyard with resident amenities. Because this is on the State and National Register, your review and approval is needed before staff can issue either a building or demolition permit for relating to this building. And so we've summarized that your job is to review the modification and building addition demolition to determine whether the project would damage or destroy any of the character defining features of the historic Lee building complex. And so the only significant change that we could see was removal and replacement of the glass block on the first floor. That restoration of that back to storefronts is actually more consistent with the historical look of the building. The other thing we would report is that the 2-story addition was relatively recent compared to the original construction. It was done in 1959. It's kind of a nondescript masonry block building. It really kind of detracts from the architecture of the remaining complex, and so its removal and reuse as a courtyard area should actually be a positive, both for this building site and the downtown district as a whole. So we have gone through the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation, and we have provided on page 5 findings that we think could be incorporated to support a motion to approve the scope of work that's proposed by JGR Architects. And so your options would be to approve a certificate of appropriateness for the modifications and demolition associated with Building 2. You could approve it subject to any conditions approved by a majority of the commission members. You could postpone consideration this afternoon to acquire additional information. Or you could deny the certificate of appropriateness if you believe that the changes would damage or destroy any character-defining features of the building. So our recommendation to satisfy your dual role of local design review as well as state law review is that this be done, if you wish to approve this, in two motions. One would be your approving a certificate of appropriateness under option 2 with the conditions outlined, and then a second motion that the changes in scope of work would not damage or destroy the Lee Hardware building. So you're doing a dual review today, one for local design review, one on behalf of the State Historic Preservation Office. And so they just have a slightly different set of findings, so we're recommending that it be done in two motions. But with that, Dustin, I'm going to ask you to put up on the screen the list of character-defining features. And so when this was nominated to the National Register of Historic Places, these were the things that were found to be significant. And so the brick exteriors on the facades, the cornices and finials, the parapet at the top. We have double hung and triple windows on the west elevations. There's some arch-topped windows on the north, south, and west elevations. We have brick and tile windowsills. We have a shared drive dock that has steel roof members between the north and south towers. That's currently a courtyard. We have the cut block that's part of the limestone foundation. And then we have some parapet extensions. For your benefit, I've had to go through it about 5 times before I could keep it straight, but the north building closest to Elm is referred to as the Mercantile Building, and then the south building, the other side of the courtyard, is the Hardware Building. So Building 1 is Mercantile, Building 2 is Hardware, and then Building 3 is the Hardware addition. And so if you could go back to that, Dustin, we would. So the front elevations of both buildings are considered to be significant. If you want to keep scrolling, we have the Hardware Warehouse, which is the far south building. And then if you want to go to the north elevation, that building was already, that work was reviewed in 2018. And then we have the loading docks, and then we have the 2 steel fire escapes on the dock side of both buildings. And then within the building, the original elevator shafts, the stair towers, the stair entrance towers, and the wood stairs where they occur were considered to be character-defining features of the buildings. So I guess I was going to ask Ms. Gillum to come to the podium there, and we could, I think we'll work from the bottom up, Dustin, and we'll just, so for the benefit of the commission, could you discuss what changes, if any, or modifications are proposed for the interior that would either affect or maintain those 3 features that are identified there?
Okay, so we've got original Stair towers, stair entrance towers, wood stairs. So in this building, there are two sets of stairs that come up actually in the center of the building. They have horizontal fire doors, which are the ones that lay flat on the ground and you have to push them up. They have a pulley system, so they're not conducive to residential use, or, where they're located is also not conducive to apartment layout. They're very dangerous. Those doors are extremely heavy. So we are removing those stairs and the doors. However, we're going to keep several of those doors to be able to display throughout the building just for historic value, because they are very cool looking. But those two sets of stairs will be removed entirely. The floor will be filled in, and then we'll be creating two new sets of code-compliant stairs along the north wall of that building that egress out to the north courtyard. Those are the only stairs in that building. And they're not stair towers. They are just open stairs and rails, so there's no firewall, there's no shaft or anything like that. They're just open to each floor as you go up through the building. The original elevator shafts we actually determined are not original to the building. They're CMU construction, which is not, we work with Rosin Preservation, and they had determined throughout their research that those were at some point installed in the building at a later date. We're not quite sure what that date is. They're still considered historic, and we are keeping those. We're not removing those. We're using the one on the west end for the new elevator for the whole building, and then the one on the we're reusing the one on the west or the east end for the new elevator. The one on the west end the floor will be infilled and it will be used for a bedroom in all the units as you go up through the floors.
So some of these would overlap with the north building, but in terms of the office space, the historic brick fireplace, the tin ceilings, those types of things, are those in the north building, or do any of those refer to this building?
Right, so the north building is the space that has the historic office area with the fireplace and the vault doors, but there is a small, I don't know if you call it an office area, but a small, more historic area in this building on the first floor on the west end, right off Santa Fe, that does have some tin ceilings and some original plaster walls that we intend to keep and restore and repair as needed.
So the application mentions removal of the metal fire escapes. The metal fire escapes on the dock side that's referred to there, those are going to be removed as part of this, or are those going to stay?
Yes, all the fire escapes on this building will be removed. They're no longer needed for egress, and they're more of a liability and safety concern than they are useful. So.
Okay, and then that brings us to the Fifth Street side. The narrow archtop windows on the upper floors, are those going to stay?
The Fifth Street side, narrow archtop windows. I mean, I think they're all arch-topped windows, but yes, all the windows
So
will
all
stay.
the framing for all the windows will stay the same. You're just going to replace the glass to make it more.
No, so these, the windows on the north, east, and south facades are going to be replaced with new windows. Those are steel. Currently, they're damaged, they're bent, they're beyond repair. So we will be replacing those windows with new windows that very closely resemble the windows as they're configured today. We did that on Building 1, so the windows that you're seeing there will be the same exact windows that go back into Building 2.
Right, so then if you want to, we can skip the north facade, 'cause we've already dealt with that. So the hardware, the hardware building, we're talking about historic windows on the upper floors have been replaced with non-original, so those will remain. And then the non-original that's been infilled with the brick and glass block will be removed and replaced, and then the limestone facade will remain, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So you can, So keep going, Dustin. So the cornices, the parapet, the double and triple windows on the west elevations, those are staying the same.
Yes, so the windows on floors 2 through 5 on the west elevation, those frames will remain. They're newer frames, aluminum frames. They're in pretty good shape, so we're going to keep those there. Just replace that glass so that it is insulated glass versus 1/8-inch thick glass.
And the cornices and parapets will remain as is.
Yes.
Okay. So I think the main points just from that is that there will be windows replaced, but with similar, so, and then the other thing, I don't know what the significance is of what they thought in terms of the metal fire escapes on the east side, but all, just to clarify, all the existing metal fire escapes will be removed. So we just wanted to kind of go through so you were familiar with what was considered to be character defining features, since you're being asked to conclude that there's not going to be any damage or removal to what would be considered significant character defining features. So with that, I'll see if you have any questions of staff. Otherwise, we'll turn it back over to Ms. Gillum to let her make some comments that aren't in response to my questions. So. Or if not, you can address any questions you might have to Ms. Gillum about the plans. So if there are no questions of either staff or the applicant, then I will turn it back over to the acting chair to see if there's any desire by a commission member to make a motion.
I would confirm that we do not have anyone from the public on Zoom, but we do have an applicant representative in Mr. Austin Cack, who is with us on Zoom, and he's been working with Ms. Gillum on this project.
Is he unmuted in case he wanted to?
Yeah, he is muted. I don't know if he has anything to share or not.
Okay.
I do not have anything to share at this time. If there's any questions about the development, I'm more than happy to answer those.
So it appears that we did send notice out to all owners of property within 200 feet of this site, and so they'd had an opportunity to be to comment, and we've just not received any feedback from anyone, and not having anyone present here, I think I can refer it back to the commission to see if any commission member would like to make a motion regarding the south hardware building, which we'll refer to as Building 2.
I'd make a motion that we approve the certificate of appropriateness for the proposed exterior facade modifications to Building 2 and minor building addition demolition based upon staff suggested findings, subject to the conditions identified, which are if there are any significant changes to the project as approved, Development Service staff will be notified to determine whether additional staff or Heritage Commission review will be required, and a separate demolition permit shall be applied for and issued for the demolition of the 2-story addition at the rear of the building.
Is there a second?
I would second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
So that was a recommendation regarding the certificate of appropriateness, and we would, to satisfy our review on behalf of the state, I would entertain a motion from a commission member if you agree that the scope of work will not damage or destroy the character-defining features of the Lee building complex.
I'd recommend, or I'm sorry, I move that we approve a second motion finding that the scope of work for Phase 2 proposed by the project architect will not damage or destroy the Lee Hardware building complex.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Okay, so both of those motions were approved 5-0. And item 3.2 is a companion to this. And so the difference here is that the Lee Hardware Warehouse Addition that we're referring to as Phase 3 or Building 3, this renovation will occur after the work on Phase 2, and the plan is to convert this area to loft apartments as well. There's 32 units proposed in the warehouse building addition, and those will consist of studio 1 and 2 bedroom units. And the main thing with this is it has some minor exterior modifications, but not the change to the storefront. And so we're talking about on this building tuck pointing and mortar and brick repair, removal again of all metal fire escapes. There's an existing set of stairs at the front of the building. Those will be repaired. And on the west facade, the steel window frames will be restored and new insulated glass installed. So the changes proposed to this far south building are pretty minor. And so we have provided some suggested findings on page 4 of that report that somewhat mimic the findings for the Phase 2 building. And again, on this one, your options are to approve a certificate of appropriateness for the modification to Building 3, approve it subject to any conditions, postpone consideration, or deny the application as presented. And again, we would entertain 2 motions, one for this local review certificate of appropriateness and a second one for the state review dealing with whether the changes would damage or destroy the Lee Hardware building complex. So again, this is the look from the west for Building 3. Most of the features are being retained. The windows are being just with retained but with new glass, and only minor changes to the front facade other than the front stairs are kind of damaged and chipped away in some points, and those will be repaired. I think one of the things we didn't make as clear as we could is that the Building 2, which is next to the courtyard, the front entrance into that is actually from the courtyard, and here this building will have an entrance on Santa Fe. And so with that, I would entertain any questions you have for staff about its report, or if you have any questions for the project architect, you could direct those to Ms. Gillum.
Ms. Gillum, am I correct to understand that Building 1 and Building 2 would have all aluminum windows, whereas the plan is to have steel windows, just replacing the glass?
Yeah, so the original windows in this building are steel. So we are just retaining those frames and replacing the glass. The windows that are new would be aluminum.
It's just out of curiosity, but is the center portion of that between 2 and 3, does that go to either building, or will it only go into 3?
Currently, it does. There's a door that, doorway openings on every floor that, to where you can access building 2 from 3. On floors 2 through 5, we will be closing those in because of the new apartments that are going into building 2. It will remain open on the first floor. That's a historic door that's currently there, so we're going to retain that. We don't know who the tenant is yet for the first floor of building 2, but we would imagine that that door would remain in use as another option to enter the building.
And that first floor is just wide open with the concrete pillars that are in there.
Currently, right, all the floors are pretty much open, just warehouse space. There's not really much in terms of existing partitions or anything that's been added over the years.
Okay.
We're ready for a motion again.
Are there any other questions for the applicant's representative or staff?
Do the gutters, downspouts that are there now, are they going to be retained?
So there are some downspouts on both the west and the east facade. You can see them in that elevation there. So we're going to replace the scuppers and the boxes and the downspouts. Actually, the city has installed a drainage system that goes underground to the sewer, so we're going to connect them on the west side to those. The back side will just surface drain.
Any other questions? Would entertain a motion at this time?
I'll move to approve a certificate of appropriateness for the proposed exterior facade modifications to building 3, based upon staff suggested findings, subject to any conditions identified and approved by a majority of Heritage Commission members.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We need to add that.
So we'd be looking for a second motion as part of the State Historic Preservation Office review. If you, as a commission, find that the scope of work for Phase 3 will not damage or destroy the Lee Building complex.
Do we need to clarify on that? We've already passed and approved the motion, but we didn't clarify what the condition was.
We'll clarify with Mr. Mike Sell, the maker of the motion. You chose option 2 with any conditions identified and approved by a majority of the Heritage Commission members. Did you intend to include the recommended condition that if there's any significant changes to the project as approved, we would be notified and determine whether this needs to be brought back for
Yes, that
additional review?
That was my intention.
Okay, so the motion that's before the commission and the second would be to approve recommendation option 2 with the condition outlined on page 5. So that motion was approved 5-0, and so you've made a finding that the scope of work for Phase 2 will not damage or destroy the building complex. We'd be looking for a second motion dealing with Phase 3, Building 3.
I'd move that we approve the second motion, finding that the scope of work for Phase 3 proposed by the projected architect will not damage or destroy the Lee Hardware Building complex.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
That completes our review of those projects. I would just, before Ms. Gillum rejoins the commission, ask her to just update the commission and staff what they're looking at in terms of timeline for moving forward on phase 2.
So we have submitted building number 2 to the State Historic Preservation Office and the National Park Service. We are working on our application for building 3. We usually anticipate those take anywhere from 3+ months for them to review and have their comments back to us. So the plan is for us to kind of mirror that timeline with our permit drawings. So we're looking at possibly submitting for permit on it, at least building 2 by March sometime, maybe start construction April, May. And then building 3 maybe just slightly behind that schedule.
And these submittals that are under review are part of your historic tax credit applications, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so there's your update on the Lee buildings, and we'll let Ms. Gillum rejoin the commission.
Thank you, everyone.
Well, I'll let.
Okay,
situated.
then let's move on to item 3.3, application CA 22-5.
So this application has been filed by Mr. Tyler Blanchard on behalf of Barrett Solar, which is a solar panel provider and contractor. And the request is for a certificate of compatibility to be approved to allow the installation of roof-mounted solar panels on a property that's located within a historic district. The specific address is 530 South 8th Street, and this is a property that is located in the Highland Prescott 8th Street Historic District. However, it is identified as a non-contributing property. So I'm going to turn it over to Spencer here, who has worked on this case, and he'll be providing a report to the commission.
Okay. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Commissioners. So as Dean just described, this last agenda item we have tonight is a request for a certificate of appropriateness approval to install roof-mounted solar panels, 14 of which would be visible from the from South 8th Street in the Highland Ave, Prescott Ave, 8th Street Historic District. So this house was constructed in approximately 1926, and it's a four square wood-framed home on a brick foundation with craftsman-style architectural features. So this subdivision, BB Second Edition, where this property is located, was platted in 1938, and this property was zoned R2 when the city was comprehensively rezoned in 1977. Then in 1992, when the Highland Ave, Prescott Ave, 8th Street Historic District was created, this property was included in that district and was identified as a non-contributing property. On October 24th, 2022, a permit for 30 roof-mounted solar panels was submitted by Barrett Solar on behalf of property owners at 530 South 8th Street, Jake and Hannah McKnight. So Section 2 of Ordinance Number 929512, which created the Highland Ave, Prescott Ave, 8th Street Historic District, states that significant architectural features, including the principal facades, main entrances, protruding bays, dormers, covered porches, extended entryways, verandas, surface embellishments of material, color or texture inherent to a particular identifying style, roof forms and profiles, cantilevered eaves, soffit types, and brackets within this district should be protected. The submitted solar panel permit showed that 14 of the proposed solar panels would be visible from South 8th Street. So pursuant to this ordinance, approval from the Heritage Commission is necessary before solar panels can be installed. So the applicant was given the opportunity to be approved administratively if the plans could be revised so that solar panels would not be visible from South 8th Street. However, the applicant contends that this would not be efficient or feasible because the east portion of the roof comprises a substantial portion, as is quite noticeable on the provided site plan. And unfortunately, we have to let you know that the electrical subcontractor, Free State Electric, did install the permits, or the panels without a permit. So Chapter 42464 of the City Code states that a certificate of appropriateness is required when any construction, alteration, demolition, or removal affecting a significant exterior architectural or historical feature takes place in a historic district. So that's why we are hearing this case today. Section E of Chapter 42464 notes that the least stringent evaluation is applied to non-contributing properties, which, as a reminder, this property is. However, it's important to note that this property is located almost in the geographic center of this district, and it's adjacent to many contributing properties, and it's also very close to the Prescott House at 211 West Prescott Ave. So currently, the city does not have any design guidelines for roof-mounted solar in a historic district like many cities do. Many cities around the country apply the Secretary of the Interior's standards for rehabilitation, which is attached as page 154 of the packet. And also Chapter 42464, Section F of the Salina City Code specifically states that the U.S. Secretary of the Interior's standards for rehabilitation are not strictly applied to non-contributing properties. That, coupled with the fact that this is the first proposed solar panel application in a designated historic district, this could potentially be viewed and interpreted in a couple different ways. So the Heritage Conservation Ordinance states that in considering an application for a certificate of appropriateness, this commission shall be guided by the following standards. A, every reasonable effort shall be made to provide a compatible use for a property that requires a minimal alteration of a building, structure, site, or object in its environment, or to use a property for its originally intended purpose. B, the distinguishing original qualities or character of a building, structure, or site and its environment shall not be destroyed. The removal or alteration of any historic material or distinctive architectural feature should be avoided when possible. E, distinctive stylistic features or examples of skilled craftsmanship that characterize a building, structure, or site shall be treated with sensitivity. And I, contemporary design for alterations and additions to existing properties shall not be discouraged when such alterations and additions do not destroy significant historical, architectural, or cultural material, and such design is compatible with the size, scale, color, material, and character of the property or neighborhood. Ordinance number 92-9512 states that significant exterior architectural features, which once again include the principal facades, main entrances, covered porches, roof forms, and profiles, should be protected in this historic district. Article 4, the Heritage Conservation District section from Chapter 42 of the Salina City Code, states that reasonable efforts shall be made to maintain compatibility with architectural alterations. Alterations of historic or distinctive architectural features shall be avoided when possible. Examples of skilled craftsmanship that characterize a building shall be treated with sensitivity, and contemporary design for building alterations must be compatible with the size, scale, color, material, and character of the property or neighborhood. So in the case of this proposed solar project, 14 black LG solar panels are proposed on the east-facing roof slope, which will clearly be visible from 8th Street and will contrast the gray asphalt shingle roof and green-colored house. So as renewable energy sources become more affordable and communities continue to expand those options and use them, the Heritage Commission will have to balance those considerations while also preserving historic integrity, and also compliance, of course, with Ordinance 92-9512 and Article 4 of the Salina City Code. So there are possible findings for both support and denial of this application. The possible findings for support include, first off, this property is identified as a non-contributing structure and pursuant to Section 42464 of the Salina City Code is not required to strictly adhere to the U.S. Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. Second, Section 1.3, value statements of the City of Salina's 2010 Comprehensive Plan, states that growth, development, and redevelopment that is fiscally responsible, environmentally sensitive, sustainable, efficient, and supported by quality municipal services is important to the people of Salina and should be considered in future decisions. This application appears to be congruent with all of those objectives. And third, in comparison to many adjacent properties within this historic district, this house at 530 South 8th Street has a rather low sloping roof, which I guess compared to houses nearby with steeper sloped roofs, solar would be slightly less visible here. Possible findings for denial include, first off, that Ordinance 92-9512 states that significant exterior architectural features, which are the principal facades, main entrances, covered porches, roof forms, and profiles, should be protected in this historic district. Because 14 roof-mounted solar panels on the east sloping roof would be visibly noticeable from South 8th Street, the principal facade, the main entrance, covered porch, roof form, and profile would be affected. Second, the Heritage Conservation District section from Chapter 42 of the City Code asserts that reasonable efforts shall be made to maintain compatibility with architectural alterations. Alterations of historic or distinctive architectural features shall be avoided when possible. Examples of skilled craftsmanship that characterize a building shall be treated with sensitivity, and contemporary design for building alterations must be compatible with the size, scale, color, material, and character of the property or neighborhood. In the case of this proposed solar project, reasonable efforts to maintain compatibility with the historic and distinctive architectural features of the house and historic district have not yet been made. Examples of skilled craftsmanship that characterize the building would be impacted, and the design of the proposed panels would not be compatible with the structure or the character of the district. Third, this proposed solar project would be a major design modification to the front facade of this house, which would affect the district's ability to communicate its historic significance. And lastly, although identified as non-contributing, this house is adjacent to many contributing properties as well as the Prescott House, which is this district's landmark. So with that, it appears that the Heritage Commission may take the following alternative options. Number one, can approve the certificate of appropriateness request based on the findings and conclusions noted above in the staff report and the applicant's documentation and evidence provided at the hearing. Two, can approve the certificate of appropriateness request based on the findings and conclusions noted above in the staff report and any additional written material and comments presented at the hearing, subject to any conditions the commission deems appropriate. Three, can approve an amended certificate of appropriateness request based on the findings and conclusions noted above in the staff report and any additional written material and comments presented at the hearing, allowing the 6 existing solar panels on the east-facing house roof slope to remain installed. Approve an amended certificate of appropriateness request based on the findings and conclusions noted above in the staff report and any additional written material and comments presented at the hearing, allowing the 8 existing solar panels on the front porch roof to remain installed. Postpone consideration of this application pending receipt of additional specific information, and any motion to postpone should state what information is being requested and the date and time the meeting shall be reconvened. Can deny the certificate of appropriateness request upon making findings that the standards for alterations of historic district properties have not sufficiently been met by the applicant and require the applicant to remove all existing solar panels on the east-facing roof slope. or can deny the certificate of appropriateness request upon making findings that the standards for alterations of historic district properties have not sufficiently met the applicant and require the applicant to remove all existing solar panels on the west-facing, south-facing, and east-facing roof slope. So, due to the alteration of significant exterior architectural features and noncompliance with ordinance number 92-9512 and Article 4 of the Salina City Code, staff would recommend option number 3, option number 4, option number 5, option number 6, or option number 7. So, staff and the applicant or property owner are here for any questions, but
Yeah, we just wanted to clarify that it's always our intent when we get an application to bring these to you prospectively through some form of miscommunication between Barrett Solar and a local electrical contractor. That contractor installed these without a permit. So the permit was applied for, but it was not issued because staff did not feel that we had the authority administratively to approve those panels that are on the east facade of the home. And so, unfortunately, from a timing standpoint or miscommunication, this is not a simulation. Those are actually there, but they do not have a permit issued to be there. And so you shouldn't feel that there's been some implied approval of this by staff, because as we look through all of our historic district information, dealing with siding, dealing with roofing, there's never been any guidelines or any discussion about what the ground rules should be for installation of roof-mounted solar panels in a historic district. So this is a case of first impression for the Heritage Commission. There hasn't been a similar case come before you, so that is why we've given you all the different options, which, if they're confusing, we apologize for that, but there's, you as a body could decide that these are okay, but these are not, or that these are okay and these are not, or that nothing should be done on the front facade. But in all of our research, and we tried to provide you examples in the packet, we couldn't find any guidelines that had been adopted by anyone that encouraged or recommended placement of roof-mounted solar panels facing the streetscape of the district. And so everything that we read indicated that that was the least desirable option in a historic district, unless it was a flat roof with a parapet, or unless there was installation of what's referred to as solar shingles that are truly flush mounted and blend in with the roof shingles, and that is not the case here. So either Spencer or myself would be happy to address any questions you have for staff, but we wanted to clarify that these photos are not a simulation. This is what's actually there, but we did not approve a permit for this installation. It was done by a subcontractor for Barrett Solar, and they called and requested an inspection, and we said we don't do inspections for properties that don't have a permit. So these have not been inspected or endorsed in any way by the city.
Do we know why this property was deemed as non-contributing?
It had to do with it has a simulated synthetic siding that was put on sometime prior to 1992, and the write-up on this said that because the siding was not original and it was a newer product, that is why it was deemed to be non-contributing. contributing. There may have been something else in there relating to the roof, but absent the siding, the home is remarkably architecturally intact from its time of construction, which I believe was 1926. Didn't we determine that? So this home was built in 1926, had the porte-cochere, all those things on it, and the only thing that was noted in the historic survey write-up is that it had a simulated siding product that was not a product of the time when it was built. But other than that, other than the siding, it is architecturally intact.
What is the city's process for, I guess, dealing with something like this, that when it happens is done without a permit? Is there any kind of reprimand that happens?
We have various forms of contractor discipline. All contractors are licensed through the city, and as part of that license, they agree to adhere to the regulations that the city has. So we have various degrees of discipline, from a reprimand to a suspension of the license, to being put on a probationary status. But we have had contractors whose licenses have been suspended, and that means during the course of that suspension they can't get permits to do work while they're suspended. The other thing that we occur is we have, if you apply for a permit and don't wait for the status of the permit to be determined, then if the end result is we issue a post-installation or post-construction permit, then there's an administrative fine that's associated with that if we issue the permit after the work is done. So those are the consequences. But if you are a licensed contractor and you do work without a permit, there is a disciplinary process for contractors who do work without permits.
Okay. Does anybody have any additional questions for staff? If not, I would invite the applicant to come up and answer a few questions for us. And if you could state your name, please, and who you're with.
My name is Jake Morris. I am the homeowner.
Okay, thank you. I guess I have a question. You know, Dean had mentioned that there was a miscommunication between maybe the solar company and the subcontractor. Could you please walk us through how that happened, how they were installed prior to having a permit?
I am not too certain about that one, as Barrett Solar has been the one taking care of everything administrative with this project. What I know is that the permit was applied for, and I hadn't heard anything myself. After that, they would be the ones to discuss that one more. And then, I mean, my thought was that it was approved, but I hadn't heard anything either way until, sorry. I had not heard that it was not approved until after they were up.
So that question might be better addressed to Spencer, who does the reviews. And I wanted to clarify that we have done a number of solar panel installations on residences outside of historic districts, but this was different because it was in the historic district. But I might let Spencer walk you through his communications with Barrett Solar.
So they submitted their application on October 24th of this year. My alarm bells were going off that this was in a historic district, so I relayed this through Dean, and he told me to provide them an application for a certificate of appropriateness to be heard by this board. They seemed understanding of that. They turned back their application in, and I walk them through the subsequent steps for approval after going to this commission. They seemed like they were understanding of what was going on, and there's tons of emails and all that to kind of show that it appears that we're all on the same page. And then one day Dean and I were putting packets together, and then we got the information that the solar panels had been put up, and the subcontractor was requesting an inspection. So I mean, it seemed like we were all on the same page, and then they just kind of popped up. So to me, it sounded like a genuine miscommunication, because I was communicating only with Barrett Solar. I never communicated with the electrical subcontractor. So my impression was that there was a genuine miscommunication, but it is their responsibility to keep them in the loop and have them doing the correct things that they should be doing. So that's really all I have to say on that.
If I can add to that, I believe that the subcontractor was contracted by Barrett Solar prior to the permit being applied for, and the subcontractor just never got the notification that it was not approved.
Okay. Dean, is there, even if someone was installing solar panels on a home outside of the historic district, is there still a permit process for that?
Yes.
Okay.
The difference here was that Spencer brought this to me. I asked whether the installation would be limited to just the west and the south exposures, in which case I felt like we could issue the permit. But in my experience and in my reading and research, it was clear that nationwide, and looking at the National Park Service and other resources, that there was a distinction between placing solar panels on a rear facade not visible from the street from placing them on the front facade, which is the facade that has the most impact in a historic district. So I told Spencer that we could not approve a permit to install the panels on the front. And so our communication back to Barrett Solar was, if you're willing to delete the panels from the east-facing side, then we would consider issuing a permit administratively. But if you, and their response back was, to make this worth doing or cost effective, they needed all the panels, including the east-facing ones, in which case we told them that staff did not feel that we had the authority to issue a permit on the front-facing facade, and if they were insisting on that, then they would have to wait for the Heritage Commission to conduct their review and give guidance to staff. And so that was the intention. We have, I don't know, Spencer, is probably close to 10 or maybe even more solar installations that we have done, but every single one of them involves a permit review. Part of our permit review is to determine, is this property in the historic district? Is there anything significant about this? So that is a standard part of our permit review, and in this case, we just felt like we didn't have the authority, that the authority lied with the Heritage Commission, since there had never been a rooftop solar installation in a historic district before, that we would bring it to you and let you advise us what you think is appropriate. So
I don't know if anyone else on the board agrees or may disagree with me, but I just feel like this is putting us in a really, really tough spot here, because on one hand, they're installed, and I know it would create a financial hardship on you all to have those uninstalled and taken down. But on the other hand, we're looking at something that's potentially creating a precedent for others in this district that might want to install solar panels on their roof, because I can see it being something that might come before us again in the future, seeing as how the energy trend is moving towards solar. So I'm I'm just struggling a little bit with that, and how to make a determination here. So I don't know.
Yeah. One of the things in the findings that Spencer's tried to offer up for the board, one of the findings that you should not rely on is the fact that they're already up in any financial hardship, because that would be unfair to someone in the future who asked permission instead of forgiveness. And so it's not good to treat someone differently that's asking for permission to do something, as opposed to, and it's this board, it's very seldom. We do have some cases with the Board of Zoning Appeals where we have brought what we would refer to as post-construction forgiveness variances, and so those are always difficult, and there's been cases that have gone both ways. That is a factor that you as commissioners and as owners yourself can take into consideration, but that would not be a good thing to make a finding and base a decision on. It's something you could take into consideration, but that would be the type of thing that would set a precedent for the future to say if you do it without getting permission, then we're stuck, as opposed. So you need to look at if there's other reasons why approving this in these circumstances is okay, and how you might distinguish this from another home in the historic district, such as if someone wanted to put solar panels on the top of the Prescott house at Prescott and Highland. That might be viewed differently, but you need to think about in your own minds what would be different about that than this.
Okay. Does anyone have any additional questions for Mr. Morris? If not, I would maybe invite the board to have a discussion about this and how we feel we'd like to see solar panels addressed in the future, and maybe that will help us come to a decision here.
For the record, I would note that we do not have anyone from the public on Zoom or in the room.
Okay, thanks.
Because as the chair rightfully pointed out, while this may be the first, it's likely not to be the last solar panel request. And so you're not, we're not amending something into code, but what you think is important or not important in this case would be helpful for each other. It would be helpful for staff. But that was the point that I made as zoning administrator. Said, we're not approving this administratively. We're going to bring it to the commission and let the commission advise us what you think is appropriate, because that will help us in the future.
My thoughts coming from the Heritage Commission would be to look at it, take the permitting process out of it. Would we have approved it as it stands? And I don't think, personally, I would have approved the solar panels on the east side, because it really detracts from the neighborhood. As far as the permitting, I agree with Chairperson that we don't want to set a precedent that you can get around the process just by not doing a permit and then coming back and basically asking for forgiveness later. But that still, I think, leaves open the south side. If we say no to the east side, that still leaves the south side with solar panels that haven't been permitted. So I don't know how you address that as well.
What our written communication to Barrett Solar was, if you will delete or remove the east-facing panels from your application, we would, as a staff, administratively approve a permit for the south and west-facing panels, because they are not visible from the front facade in the historic district. So if that were the case, and you said that it's only the east-facing ones that concern you, we would just administratively issue a permit for the south and west-facing panels, notwithstanding that they were already put up. But that's why we have provided you with so many different options, because you may have different thoughts about the lower roof or the upper roof. You may not all agree that the south and west facing ones are innocuous and not impactful. But if you were to say that you don't think the east facing ones are appropriate, we would simply issue a permit for the south and west facing ones and do that administratively. If you tell us as a commission you don't have concerns about panels that are not visible from the street.
Does anyone else have any thoughts or comments? I tend to agree with Mr. Ivy that if this had come before us pre-installation, I would have requested that the east panels be removed or relocated to other roofs not directly visible from 8th Street. I think that the staff's findings in terms of research they've done in other areas that have solar panels, and finding that other historic districts are not allowing those panels to be installed facing the historic street, I think is very relevant. And I would be concerned if other homeowners wanted to come with solar panels facing Santa Fe or Highland Street, because a lot of those homes do have similar style porticos as these and low roofs to where those are very visible.
And I would agree with that. And even to bring up the fact that this is a non-conforming property, that it still falls in the historic district. It shares a lot of the same stylistic details of all of the neighboring houses. I mean, it may be non-conforming due to the siding, but the siding is still very nice siding. And I mean, it still, while it's not specific to the time of construction of the house, it still fits in very nicely. And having these solar panels installed on the front-facing facade does make it stand out amongst the rest of the houses that are in that same district. And so I would agree with that, that personally I don't think that they belong on the street-facing side.
Yeah, I would agree. When you look at the drawings from Barrett Solar, the panels look like they set flush onto the roof. But looking at this photo, you can see the tips on that south side sticking up. I don't know if it would make much of an impact, if they were actually flush on the roof, or a difference aesthetically. And I guess I don't know, since we don't have anybody from Barrett Solar here. It seems like there's still room to put smaller panels, additional panels on that south and east side. If the panels on the street side were removed. Just a thought.
And along those lines too, even on the south-facing side of the garage back there, is a possibility to put some of those additional panels.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any more discussion, or is there a particular one of these recommendations that someone is wanting to make a motion on?
So as I look through the wide menu of options, what some of you have been discussing, if you find that the findings have not sufficiently been met and you want to have all east-facing solar panels not be approved, then that would be option 6. The other ones, 3 and 4, deal with the option of approving one roof slope but not the other. So the option 3 would allow the 6 solar panels on the upper roof to remain. Option 4 would allow the 8 panels on the lower roof to remain. Option 6, you would be finding that none of the east-facing panels should be allowed there.
Are we ready for a movement?
If there's no further discussion, I think we are ready for a movement, yes.
I would move that we deny the certification of appropriateness request upon making findings that the standards for alterations of historic district properties have not been sufficiently met by the applicant and require the applicant to remove all existing solar panels on the east-facing roof slope.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
So we have a motion and second for option 6, the denial of certificate of appropriateness. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None.
Okay, so we will prepare a written summary of your action on that, and you have given us some good guidance today about what you feel is appropriate or inappropriate, so we won't have to wonder or guess if we get another request about what the right course of action is. So we appreciate you giving us that feedback.
Okay, it does not appear that we have any more new business items. Is there any administrative or other discussion items?
The only thing we would have is the only reason we would have to meet more quickly in the new year would be if we had an application and we needed to schedule a special meeting. But as of now, we would have a meeting on the final Wednesday of January 2023, and that would be for the purpose of reviewing your annual report and submitting that on to the City Commission, which would just be a summary of the actions that you took in 2022 and any communication to the City Commission. So we have no further business to bring before you this evening, and I guess we'd wish everyone a happy holiday season, and we'll hopefully see you again next year, but you won't see us again this year.
Okay, great. And seeing as we don't have any public, I assume we've got no public forum today, so I would take a motion to adjourn today's meeting.
Before we do that, I had a question for staff. Has there been any movement on the demolition permit for the house on the 600 block of South Santa Fe?
What occurred is that there was an agreement that was entered into by the owner with the City Commission. The City Commission gave that owner a time extension to commence the demolition. The demolition contractor indicated to staff that they felt that they would not be compensated if they move forward with that, so that is going to be done as a city-initiated demolition. In other words, we will hire the contractor, we will have the work done. What that primarily means is that when the city does it and there's costs incurred, then we levy those costs as a lien against the property. And so what would happen is if the lot is cleared, it becomes vacant, somebody becomes interested in that. If they go to purchase it, they would have to pay off that demolition lien in order to have title to the property. So it was, there was a contractor retained, but the contractor expressed to staff that they didn't think they would get paid if they did the job. So they would get paid by the city instead, and then those costs would go onto the lot. And it would be done under the contract with the city, because they have they did not meet their deadline that was given by the city commission to commence demolition.
Any other questions for staff before we adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thanks, everyone.
I have some